Now, the podcast elves have been sifting through the mailbags for a one-off But Your Email special. Normally we do one a week from our Patreon backers, but before Parliament returns and the autumn madness begins, we've opened it up to everyone. So let's get stuck in. Now, I'm not sure if this is the easiest or the hardest question. John Christensen, if you had to guess, how many seats will the Tories have after the next general election?
Ooh.
Like, let's predict rather than wish.
About 200?
I was going to say about 115.
That's, come now. Surely that's wishful thinking. I mean, I would say somewhere between that. I mean, I just can't see like the proper wipeout that I can't remember how many they got in 97.
165 and then 166 in 2001. So that's the bar. Will it be worse or more or not?
Yeah. I mean, the current models that I've seen have them on 164 versus...
Almost
137. 137. The models have them on 137 with Labour and 425. But I think it will tighten. I think it will shift before the next election. So I would say 160 to 395.
What? That's a big range.
What?
No, I mean to Labour.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
No, I'm saying that they'll have about 160.
I just
Labour
love
will
the
have
estimate.
about 390.
Somewhere between 0 and 650, you know. Okay, good. So we're all saying below 200.
Yes.
About that, yeah.
Elizabeth Harris. David Lammy says that Labour would be too busy setting out their programme to repeal some of the really heinous laws passed by this government. Is there another way to reduce the impact of laws against protesting, etc., or are we just going to be stuck with them? Naomi, we were saying that this was a little bit of a frustration, that it would be nice if Labour were like, here are some bad things the Tories have done that we are going to get rid of. Because I think, you know, obviously some things are very time consuming. I think some of these wouldn't be. And it's not really an excuse to go, we're just going to be busy, not spending money or whatever they're promising. But in terms of what other people can do, reducing the impact of laws against protesting. So if you can't repeal that law...
I mean, there's secondary legislation. There are sort of, tweaks that could be done that wouldn't take up as much parliamentary time. And as we were talking about with Ian's book, executive power is real. They can do a hell of a lot and bypass Parliament, as Johnson and his successors have done on a range of things. And then there's also just turning a blind eye. So there is also the signalling you can give to the Met to don't go heavy-handed on protesters, don't over-police today's demonstration.
I think that's the most important aspect.
It'll be a nudge, nudge, wink, wink stuff.
I think that's the most important aspect, and I think that's why they're not particularly interested. It's not a first 100 days thing.
Right.
To make something not happen that wasn't really happening very much anyway.
You can do it more subtly.
Well, I mean, it's like smoking pot,
Right.
It's never been decriminalised, but the police has been told just ignore
As we've seen, the police don't have to investigate every crime.
Yeah, but, I mean, so if you're setting out priorities, in your first 100 days, you want really economic growth, stimulus, public infrastructure projects. You want all of that because you want people to start feeling that economically the atmospherics are changing straight
So
away.
that's promising, this idea that things probably would change, but they wouldn't change in a dramatic, like we're putting a red line through this law.
Yeah, but also, if you wanted to go that route, I think the idea that you don't have the time for it is a load of old cobblers. Actually, we have plenty of experience of governments of both sides of the last few decades doing a mass repeal. Passing new laws really quickly is hard and not good for a number of reasons, but actually just repealing things and resetting them to an earlier stage is much less of a problem.
I just think that I was a bit disappointed by that line from Lammy because it's just that doesn't seem true.
I get that. I mean, the counter argument would be like, there's been such a chaotic sort of tagging of stuff onto other stuff, like immigration. There's been like 4 major pieces of legislation that have gone through, all with really quite gnarly different things. And the argument would be, is it worth repealing the Borders Act, or is it worth 3 years down the line doing a review of the immigration law as it stands and getting rid of the lot and replacing it with something that makes sense. So if I were Labour, I would be pushing a lot more the line that this thing needs a systematic review of that whole area, basically, and we'll get round to it.
Sally Bean asks, I wasn't a fan of Jeremy Corbyn, but I do think his slogan, for the many, not the few, originally Tony Blair's slogan, was
it really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
He used it back in the 90s. Was a pretty good encapsulation of the difference between the Tories and Labour. Given that it is presumably no longer usable, I'd imagine not, can the panel come up with an alternative phrase that Labour could use to express what they stand for? Now, if I was being cynical, I would sort of go, the same but a bit nicer. That's when I'm at my most kind of
Frustrated,
but obviously there are still significant differences. So, Naomi, you are a seasoned campaigner and power broker and mover and shaker and
I wish
warrior queen
I wish.
in the political sphere. So you've come up with you must have had the whiteboard of slogans a few times. So what would Labour's phrase be? Because for the many, not the few was good.
It was good. I also quite like enough is enough. And that, as a campaign, seems to have disappeared completely. And I noticed that the sort of more Corbynite faction MPs have taken it off of their Twitter bio, handles and things like that. Yeah. So enough is enough seems to have disappeared. It's... When we analyse elections the world over that are change elections, it's that word. It's change is always in it when you think about Obama and various others.
It's amazing how Obama managed to just get the word because of that poster, managed to get the word hope.
Hope, yeah.
And it's like,
that is it.
Come on.
Yeah.
But he sort of claimed it.
So it can be as simple as things like that. I mean, we've talked about how constipated the justice system is, how nothing works, everything is broken. So I think anything about fixing all of the shit that the Tories have created, fixing the problems that they've created, fixing the railways, not fixing the elections, that has a different meaning. I wouldn't go with that. But there's a lot of things that can be fixed.
Fix you, and they could use the Coldplay song.
They could see. It's everything's going to get better.
I quite like the slogan with which Labour won in the 70s in Australia, I think, which was just "It's time." I think anything that reinforces that sense that,
Is that time for change? Because that's essentially their argument.
They've had their go, and it's enough now.
Better than that lot.
So the best I could come up with in the very short time we've had. So if you're listening, Labour Party, I am very worth employing. Is repair, rebuild, renew. Just because I think there is something about the damage that's been done. Yeah. And that you're coming in with a brief to just make things better.
I feel inspired.
As quickly as possible. Yeah. So that would be mine.
It's important that it doesn't age badly when you're in government. And so something along the sense that we all have now of there's got to be something better than this can really come back and hit you badly 4 or 5 years down the line if you haven't delivered. Even its time might be quite ominous if the government doesn't do really well to begin with. So I think it's important to spell out what you stand for, and I would go for something as simple as the public good. We're all hurting. We can all see what's wrong, and it's not about presenting a series of grievances about ourselves. It's what kind of a world do we want to live in.
That's good. That's very civic.
Yeah.